So this talk is especially about culture shock, or actually, to be more specific, it's really culture stress, because it's not a shock that just comes in one big blow, but it's actually a stress that builds up. And it's specifically for those that are living in another country. It's not, you don't normally get culture shock in your home country. Yeah, you might meet people that do things differently, you might, have different cultures even within your home country, but you don't really experience culture shock or culture stress from that. You might look at things and think, oh, that's different, or that's not the way I do it, or it seems a bit strange or unusual to me, but you don't actually suffer from any kind of build-up of stress because of it usually. It's just an understanding that it's different. But if you go and live in a foreign country, you'll experience some degree of culture shock. Whether you're going as a missionary, or whether you're going as a business person, or an overseas student, an immigrant, diplomats, military personnel, whoever you are, to some degree, if you're living in another country, you end up having some kind of culture shock. And some people experience culture shock more than other people, and that depends on various different things. One of them is how deep in the actual native culture you go. If you're in another country but you're only meeting people from your own culture, yeah, you're going to have a different kind of experience to if you're meeting people from that culture all the time. It depends on how different the culture is from your own. So going from the UK to Germany is probably not going to be such a big culture shock as going from the UK to Korea, unless you're living with a Korean team in Germany. Yeah, and also your own personality can affect the degree of culture shock that you'll receive. It depends on your personality. So culture shock, some people think, oh, I had culture shock because I saw the country was dirty or poverty or something like that. It's not, culture shock is not from a sense of shock at things that look different or things that look bad at all. Of course, you can have a reaction. If you went to a very poor country, you can have a reaction to that, but that's not what we call culture shock or culture stress. Culture shock or culture stress is the disorientation. The disorientation that you feel or that you experience when cultural rules that you have learned from childhood are no longer working the way that you expect them to. So you've built up a sense of rules, a sense of understanding of what is right, what is the proper way to do things, what is the polite way to do things, what is the normal way to do things. And they're all cultural rules that you might even be not conscious of, but it's there within you. Yeah, we do things this way. If you want to be respectful to somebody, you do it this way. If you want to be polite, you do it this way. In a certain situation, you're supposed to respond or react or say this thing. But it's an anxiety. Culture shock or culture stress is an anxiety that builds up from losing all the familiar things that is in your subconsciousness of daily life, and no longer knowing properly how to interpret people. Is what they're doing, are they being polite to me? Are they being rude to me? Are they being kind to me? Are they not? What they're, the action that they're doing, or the things that they're saying, how am I supposed to respond? All of that is an anxiety when you don't fully know how to respond. So from our own childhood, in our own culture, we know what's polite, we know what's rude, we know when I am being polite or rude, or the person that's talking to me is being polite or rude. We know how to refuse something nicely without offending somebody. How do you say no in a way that doesn't upset the other person? So, but in another culture, they might be saying no to you, but you don't recognize their cues, and you think that they're still saying yes. For example, in Turkey, people would say yes, yes, but actually it meant no. And having to understand, when does yes mean no, and when does no mean no, and when do I say that to make, so it's the confusion and disorientation from not knowing these little cues that are very subtle and that everybody else knows because they've built the rules up since childhood, but that we're the one who doesn't know how it works anymore. Our own rules don't work in the new country. Yeah, we know how and where to buy things. If something's broken, usually we know where we would go to buy the thing that mends it, and how to, or who to call to do it. But in a new culture, it's all different. Yeah, or we know when to accept someone's invitation if they're being serious about it, and when to refuse because they're just being polite and saying, oh, I'll come and visit any time, but they don't really mean it. But then you turn up and they're very confused, why did you come? You know, those kind of things. It's different. When you have an invitation, you know what to expect. What should I bring? Should I bring flowers? Should I bring food? Should I bring a bag of toilet paper? You know, it's different in the different cultures, just even what to turn up with. And if you turn up with something, or they turn up with something to you that seems really strange, it's the whole stress of, well, what am I supposed to think from this? How am I supposed to understand it or interpret it? It's, a million and one things that help us behave like normal adults in our own country, but they no longer work in the country that you're living in. How to understand other people. Yeah. So, for example, I know in my own culture how to appear to be a reasonable, intelligent, well-behaved, polite adult. But in another culture, people look at me as if I'm a retarded 5-year-old, because I'm doing things that adults wouldn't do, but only children do, and you'd tell them off for doing. For example, can I blow my nose in public or not? Yeah, in some cultures you just can't blow your nose at the dinner table, but in other cultures it's perfectly normal. Can I eat with my fingers or not? Even in British culture, for me, there are some foods that you say, yeah. So people might say, no, you don't eat with your fingers, but actually you do for some things. You eat sandwiches with your fingers. You might eat chips with your fingers, but you wouldn't eat pasta, spaghetti bolognese with your fingers, right? There's certain things, but why? Just because it's a rule that your mum and dad taught you when you were little. Yeah, little kids do it wrong, and then mum and dads tell them, no, you can do this, but you can't do that, and we just learn it. But in a new culture, why can you eat this food with your fingers and not the other one? Yeah, it's different. Okay. Even the gestures that we make with our hands, they can be very polite or very rude in some places. Yeah, when I first went to Korea, I couldn't speak much Korean. I was trying to be friendly. I went to a family and they had little kids. So because I couldn't really talk to the adults, I used to play with the little kids. And in England, there's a specific thing that you do with kids to play with them, to tell them that you've taken their nose away. Yeah? So you grab the nose and say, look, I've got my nose, I've got your nose. And I didn't realise this was a very, very rude sign in Korea. A very, very rude sign. Yeah? It's like sticking up the middle finger or worse. So I was going around, doing something that my dad did to me when I was little to make me laugh, trying to make these little kids laugh, and the adults were like, what is this woman doing, being so rude to my children? Why is she such a rude, impolite, unsophisticated person? She's supposed to be a good Christian, and she's not even behaving like a good Christian should. So all this what should, but when that should that we know doesn't work in another culture, and the way that people respond and react to you is different to what you would expect, it builds up a sense of disorientation. Okay? So, yeah, you, even after months and months of study, you might feel like you are an intelligent and educated person, but you can only communicate with the level of a 4-year-old. And it really is frustrating, right? You can't communicate. You don't know the things to say. You don't know the ways to behave. And that frustration and disorientation, you can't be who you think you are. You can't show yourself, to be. Yeah. In the new culture, you're less than a child. You feel helpless. In the new culture, you don't know, for example, which is a cheap shop. which is a cheap but good quality shop, which is a too expensive shop that most people wouldn't go to unless you just want to waste your money. You know, which is which? What is the things that everybody says about these different, you know, shops? What is the general consensus of opinion? You don't know it in the beginning. Yeah, people, you don't know how much a taxi fare is supposed to be from one place to the other, and you can get ripped off. You know, and you can feel they're taking me for a fool because you can't. But in your own country, you can say, no way, I'm not paying that. Yeah, so you'd know what the different levels of things are. Everything is strange and different. You might not even, depending on how different the culture is, you might go to the shops and see lots of different vegetables, lots of different kinds of shapes of meat, and not know how to cook it. You won't find exactly the same looking food as you would in your home country. So it's like, what am I supposed to do with this food? How am I supposed to cook it? Where am I supposed to buy it? What am I supposed to do with it when I've got it? How do I eat it? How do I cook it? So it makes the confusion of what am I meant to do with all of this. And not only is it confusion, but you feel less than an adult. Yeah, if you're used to being an adult in your home country, to make decisions rationally, to judge things, you no longer have the set of rules to judge things properly by. So it gives you that sense of culture shock. People who don't understand that you've come from a different culture, people who haven't done that themselves, they think that you're stupid or weird or even bad when you do things that would be considered wrong in their culture. Yeah, when you do something that you didn't know was wrong. So you get confused, angry, and afraid. That's culture shock. It's not a one-time quick shock, which is why it's a build-up, and some people call it culture stress rather than culture shock. Okay, so do you think you've experienced that so far? Yeah, you're nodding? Yeah? Yeah. I think, Gina, you lived in Turkey for a long time, but because you were brought up there, it was probably quite different, because that you were learning all the rules at the same time of different cultures together. Yeah. But I suppose that when you were younger, doing something that's right in one culture and wrong in another could have been a bit confusing.
Maybe. I was thinking in France, when you're talking about you can't communicate properly. Yeah, I felt like a kid because I couldn't talk.
When you were in France, yeah. So that was a very short time, but you still experienced it from there. Yeah. So it's important to understand the stages of culture shock and then how to adapt into a new culture. So can you see this? So this sort of shows the stages of culture shock. And normally, when you're preparing to go to a new country, you first of all don't start out thinking this is going to be horrible, this is going to be terrible, this is going to be difficult. Usually, for most people, it's like, this is exciting. Oh, look at all these new things. I haven't seen this before. Oh, look at all these new shops. Look, I've got a big supermarket right next door. I can look at all these new things. Wow, look at this new food. Look at these German people. Oh, isn't that exciting? I can see new German words. And there's a kind of a honeymoon stage where everything's like, wow, they've got houses like this. They've got cups like this. And the people are nice. I'm new. The people are treating me as a new sort of unfamiliar person. They want to talk to me. They want to be friendly with me. So the people are welcoming. Oh, you're a foreigner to our country. Hey. And they want to talk to you or get to know you in the beginning. So most people, yeah, they have a honeymoon stage. Things are different. Things are exciting. There's fascinating sights and sounds and smells, maybe new experiences. And quite often you can find people who do speak your language who'll talk to you a little bit and help you and help us see what we need. And if you're going on a holiday to a country, very often that's all you experience, the honeymoon stage. It's like, wow, this is exciting, interesting, new, wonderful. And you leave thinking, wow, I would be fine if I lived there, because you haven't stayed to go beyond that stage. Yeah? And that stage of honeymoon stage can last a few weeks or a few months, depending on your personality and your experience. Because some people like new things, some people don't. It depends on, you know, who you are. If you don't like new things, the honeymoon stage will be very quick. If you like new things, you can go around finding lots and lots of new things, maybe for a few months. And it also depends how much you actually have to do for yourself in the new culture. The more times you try and do something and it goes wrong, or you try and do something and people respond to you in a way you didn't expect, the quicker the sense of confusion and this is not what I expected will happen. So there, this honeymoon stage here, it depends over time, depends what your character is, how quickly that fades. But it does fade. It does fade. Okay, and then you come into this sort of disenchantment stage, call it disenchantment, realization stage. This is not what I thought. It's not all just fantastic and new and exciting. It's not going to be like this forever. And yeah, the newness begins to fade, and it's like, I've got to do this every day. I can't find the things that to me are normal. I've got to live in this abnormality every day. Yeah, all the time. I can't just dip into it and then escape. It's there all the time. So it's sort of like, oh my gosh. Yeah, you face the difficulties of having to do things, having to fix things, having to get things, having to organise things, which are different. You face those difficulties over and over, and you start to go down thinking, oh, this is a lot harder than I expected. This is a lot harder than I felt. This is so much different. So the rules are different, and you don't know them, and you don't know how to find them out even sometimes. Yeah, your own ways of doing things seem logical, and the other ways seem illogical. Like, why wouldn't they do it my way? My way is the normal way. Why are they doing it a different way? And it can, because you're still trying to live by your own logical set of rules and understanding, you begin to judge theirs and think they're wrong. So usually the next stage is, why do they do it like that? Why would they? Why would they say yes and not mean yes? Why would they, make you go through all these hoops to get to do a certain thing? Why? Why can you eat this with your fingers and not eat that? Yeah? All these different things. Why can you eat, I don't know, pizza with your fingers, but you can't eat something like lasagna with your fingers? Why? If they're coming here, that's what they might think. And yeah, it's a frustration when you try and do something with a rule from your own culture and people get upset with you and you don't get it right. You just think, will I ever be able to please these people? Will I ever be able to do things right? Will I ever be accepted as a normal adult? And it sort of like goes down and down. The people that you first met, who kind of, for them, you were an exciting new thing. They've got used to you living next door or living wherever you were, and they've gone back to their own work and their own world, and they've kind of forgotten about you and left you to just get on with it yourselves. And you kind of think, oh, I'm left alone. These people are a bit indifferent to me. There's people aren't helping me as much as they used to. They expect me to already know what I'm doing now. And so it becomes like a downward emotional plunge. And usually by about 6 months in a new country, that's what people are doing. They're either already plunged down to the bottom or they're on their way down. So about the 6 months mark is when most people are starting to think, gosh, I don't really like it here. I wish I could just go home or something like that. And so you're going down, and then you sort of come to a kind of a real rejection stage. So up here, maybe you're an observer, you're looking at what people are doing and you're thinking, this is weird. This is not what I expected. And then as time goes on, you're supposed to be doing things, you're participating in the culture, but you're getting people rejecting you. And then you're starting to think, oh, this is difficult. Why don't they know that I meant it to be nice? Why are they thinking that I'm rude when I didn't mean to be rude? Why are they laughing at me when I'm trying hard or whatever it is? And the more you participate, the more you start to go down, and then you get to a kind of the bottom of culture shock, which is more rejection, really. You're just thinking, it shouldn't be like this. The normal reaction is to compare the other culture with our own unfavourably. And at that time, we usually idealise our own culture and think back home everything was so easy, and we forget that actually it wasn't. There's lots of things that are frustrating and difficult and annoying and stressful in our own cultures, but when you're in another culture, getting that kind of culture stress, you forget. You idealise your own culture and say it wouldn't be this bad if I was at home, and begin to criticise. And at that point, some people can begin, because it's hard, they can begin to withdraw from the host culture. So I'll call it the host culture, whether it's Germany or wherever you are. And if you, at that point of difficulty, to begin to withdraw, you don't ever start the recovery and adaptation curve. So you can see in lots of countries, you can see people that have gone to live there, but they never fully understand how to fit in and adapt, and they build their own little mini culture within that country. So you might get a Koreatown in some place, or a group of British expats all living together in a British way with a fish and chip shop that they've made and in a pub or whatever, and they live as if it's a mini Britain in a foreign country. And quite often people that are just there for 2 or 3 years for their job, that's normal for them. They live in a bit of an expat society, and they don't ever really fully get into the local culture. They just criticise. They go to work, get annoyed by some of the things that are happening, criticise it, and then go back to their little safety zone that they've made of their own culture within the culture. And that's never really adaptation. And you can see in some countries, people that have been living 10, 20 years in another country, but they're very sort of bitter still about the locals, and they're like, oh, they do it in a stupid way, and you probably met people like that, and they're not people that have adapted to the culture. They might live there, but they've still got their own cultural rules, and they're still judging and criticising. So that's not the aim that we have for you guys. Yeah, your aim is to be culturally adapted. You'll never become German. You'll never become, fully the culture that you're living in, but you can be adapted enough in it to feel part of it, and for other people to feel that they can connect with you and feel part of it. Yeah, so that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of the crisis point. What are you going to do when you're at that point and you're just like really annoyed with it? Are you going to withdraw into your own little new culture that you make, or are you going to really branch out and break through into the home culture, the culture that you're in? So it's a kind of feeling of, I just want to go home. Yeah, I want to go home. And if you don't begin to adapt, it's the point when you can start to get more ill. You can feel weak and ill, and if people don't really fully get in, they can have a bit of a breakdown and decide, right, that's it, I can't continue my work here, I need to go home. And that's the kind of thing that people can do if you don't learn how to push through and break through. This stage here, again, depending on how we react to it, can be longer or shorter. And if you understand the cycle, if you expected it to be, oh, I start here and then I adapt and it gets better and better and better, if that was your expectation, this will feel all the worse, and that might be the point where you want to go home. But if you understand, oh, there's a cycle like that, I will find it difficult after a while. It's normal to be feeling these feelings. It's normal to be feeling a bit of stress and culture shock. It's normal to be in a bit of a crisis, thinking I want to reject it, but I don't want to. I want to adapt as well. Yeah. When you realise that all this is normal and there is a possibility to adapt, then it's easier to cut this short and go through it. Yeah. So, yeah, you can't avoid this stage. It might be a smaller, kind of curve if the culture is nearer to your own, or if you've not had too much problem and you've managed to understand a lot in the beginning. But yeah, in any case, there's going to be some kind of plunge and some kind of need to go back up again. So recovery or adaptation is this bit here. And I would imagine probably that you guys are sort of, well, either here or coming up here. You can see where you are on your own curve. And hopefully if you are here, you know that you can start getting here, or you might be beginning to, to move up the little curve. So recovery, what happens then? Recovery is when you're starting to actually recognize some of the rules of the new culture. And you think, okay, in this situation, this is what these people do. And when you do it and you get a good response, then you feel, okay, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, so the way to greet one another, or the way to refuse something politely, or the way to give and accept invitations, as you learn to do that the way they do, and it works, then it's the beginning of recovery. And one of the really, really important things for learning this recovery phase is to be able to put aside our pride. If you stick to your own rules, and I think the older you are, the harder it can be. If people move to a new culture at the age of 40 or 50, they're already very set in their ways. It's actually quite good for you guys, because you're still actually really learning to be adults in your own culture. There's still things that you haven't done. You haven't bought a house yet. You haven't, got married and had kids and sent them to school yet. All of those things are things that you're still learning in your own culture, or you would be learning in your own culture. So learning them in a new culture is not quite as bad as someone who's already had to do that, and then they're in their 40s and 50s moving to a new culture. Yeah. So actually, you've got a good ages on your side here. So Hangyu and Hyungyung, if they're there, they're already, they've done a lot of things in their own home culture. They've had, they've held a job. They've had, things like that. It's difficult once you've done it in one culture. It's more difficult to learn all the new rules in a new one, but you'll be learning that from scratch if you're still in Germany when you get your first job, right? So it's not going to be quite so difficult. But the more you can put aside the pride about what you already know, this is the way to do something, this is the way it should be done, the more you can lay that down, the easier it is to learn a new way to do it. And think, okay, it's not that my way is better, it's just different. And that's the hardest thing, Why is a handshake better than a bow? Or why is, eating with chopsticks better than eating with your fingers? It's not better, it's just different, depending on where you are, right? And we learn the cultural rules for the culture that we're in. So instead of comparing different cultural rules, we should be comparing, in this new culture, this is what people consider as good, and that's what they consider as better, that's what they consider as worse or bad. Rather than comparing it with our own, compare it within the new culture. Yeah. So ethnocentrism, have you heard of that? Ego is like myself, like I'm the centre. Ethnocentrism means my culture, my country is the best in the world. Our country does it the best, British tea is the best in the world. Iranian rice is the best in the world, whatever, or, Korean, whatever, I don't know. Korean food is the best in the world, it's the healthiest. You hear people thinking, my food is healthy, other food isn't. It's not true. In every culture there's healthy food and not healthy food, right? If you only eat healthy food in your culture, and then in a new culture you only eat fast food, then of course it's not going to be as healthy. So there's healthy food in every culture, because people want to be healthy. There's bad food in every culture. There's good and bad in every. But this ethnocentrism, which says my cultural ways are the best in the world, and it was really bad in the first sort of 1900s missionaries going out. Rather than just trying to give the gospel to other countries, they wrapped the gospel in their own culture. It's like, if you want to come to church on Sunday, you must wear a tie, because that is best, that is proper. Maybe it was in Britain in those days, not even now so much, but maybe it was then. But it wasn't in Africa. Why make the Africans wear ties to go to church? but they did. Or why make the South Latin Americans sing in a particular way instead of in their own style? Because people didn't have that understanding of differences of culture, and they tended to see what they thought was good and holy and right, and put that whole thing, including the culture, onto a new nation. So we have to separate our ethnocentrism, thinking that our way is the best way, our way of doing church, our way of a church building looking, is the best way. One of the things that I always use as an explanation is when I first went to Korea, I was really, really shocked because there was a new church building. They were building this new church building, and they were getting all the different bits to put into it, including the seating. And I had come from an old church. It was an old Methodist church, and in this old Methodist church they'd had long pews, the long old-fashioned pews, and everyone in the church thought they were quite uncomfortable, and they'd prayed and raised money to swap the pews for nice comfy cinema type churches that flip up and down when you sit in them. And so they were all really happy that they got these special cinema type chairs to be comfortable in church. And I went to Korea, and this new build church were buying specially made pews to put in their new church building. And I was thinking, why would they do that? Why do they want those? And they're like, oh no, because they are church chairs. Churches should have long seats, not individual chairs. And that's because the missionaries that had gone to Korea had brought this idea. What was a pew? It was actually just a long chair, because people in those days had a lot of kids, and they didn't they didn't want one chair per kid. They just had a long bench, and whether you had 7 kids or 9 kids, they just all squeezed together on one of those long benches. It was just a family, a farmhouse table. That was the kind of chairs you had in your house. So when they had churches, they put the same sort of chairs in the church. So however many people there were, they could just squeeze on and fit on, and it didn't matter. So it wasn't something special and holy, it was just a normal house chair, So things like that, feeling, oh, that's not right because it's not what I know to be church, or that's not right because it's not what I know to be food, or that's not right because it's what I know to be a way of conducting business, is something that's ethnocentric, and it blocks us from learning the new cultural rules. Yeah, okay. So adjustment is when we're starting to realise things can be different without being wrong. Things can be, a different way of expressing the same thing. And we start to be able to function without too much anxiety. It's not, should I do it like this? It's like, oh yeah, I know now that when I want to invite someone, I can say it in this way. And when they say a certain phrase, I know, oh, they don't really want to come, so I won't push them. Yeah, so we're starting to be able to function without anxiety. We've got enough friends in the new culture that we realise that we would actually miss the culture and the people when we leave. That's here. If you think I could just go and I wouldn't miss anybody, then you're probably in this stage here. But when you've got enough people that you can bond to and feel they're my friends, not foreign friends, they're my German friends, or they're my English friends if you're in England, or they're my Turkish friends if you're in Turkey, they're my friends from that culture. So it's really important not to build yourself a ghetto, like I already said. So you can get out of this intense culture shock phase by building yourself your own extra sort of different culture, your alternative culture. It takes away the stress, but you never really adapt. So avoid building your own little ghetto of culture. So even if we're a team in a country, yes, it's nice to be able to think I'm coming home to a place where I'm not anxious about the culture, but don't make that your only place where you're bonding with people. Don't make it your only friendship group. Don't make it your only zone, if you like, that you're jumping out to go shopping but jumping back in again quick. Yeah, that means that you don't have a connection with the country to bless it, which is what we're trying to do. The other thing is, don't reject. Some people try and say, okay, right, I'm going to actually become German or become Turkish. You never will. Your aim is to become bicultural, so that you're comfortable in both. Don't reject your own culture and think I've got to become just like them, because that never works actually, really, because you never will become fully that. You can't get rid of the inheritance that you've been given in your own culture. So yeah, try and become bicultural so that you can be accepted enough to become one of them, but you're not actually a German. So yeah, as you become more and more bonded with people, then you learn through them. If you get good friends, they will tell you when you're doing something, and they'll tell you nicely, and you'll accept it, and you understand through their eyes what's going on. So you have people who become like your lens into the society. So getting good German friends is really, really important, not just a group of foreign friends. So yeah, that's a good point there. Symptoms of culture shock if you're here in this bottom sort of phase. Stress is actually something that is cumulative. So if you're especially taking a long time in this phase, for months and months, common amongst people that are adapting to a new culture are chronic headaches because of the stress, high blood pressure or fatigue, because it's so tiring learning something new and being in a different environment. So when I've been advised going to live in another country, they've said, you should have more sleep. If you could sleep 7 hours in your home country and not be tired, you might need to sleep 8 hours in the new country, because adapting to a new culture is physically tiring and mentally tiring. So give yourself a bit of a break and make sure you've got enough sleep. If you think I should be able to function well on this amount of sleep, actually you might need an extra hour, especially in the beginning, until you get back in until you get into adaptation stage. So yeah, fatigue. Emotional stress also creates a chemical imbalance. Actually, it physically does, and that makes us less able to resist germs. So that kind of a stress means that you're more likely to catch colds. And not only that, the germs in the new country are usually ones that you've not got an immunity to. So you end up getting more colds or more whatever illnesses are common in that country than you normally would, and that's annoying as well. Yeah, but you are building up a new immunity, and as you get over the stress, that'll be less likely. Irritability and those kind of things, anxiety, and if you're the kind of person who puts a lot of value on performance, you can feel a bit of failure because you're not performing and you're not getting the appreciation that you would like to get to make yourself feel valued. So those people that have got a good sense of self-worth and self-value struggle less through culture shock. Those people who are, always need approval, always need to know that what they're doing is valued, will suffer more. So it's really important to get your value from God and your approval from God, because you don't necessarily get it from the situation around you, because you're still a learner, you're still a baby. Yeah. How can we minimize culture shock? As much as you can, be flexible and try to enjoy new things as much as you can, but know when you've had enough and be able to give yourself a break. Yeah. Make sure that you're really drawing your self-image from God and who you are in God, not from what you can do. Yeah, that's really important. And learn methods of an adaptation as well. It's not just something that will come through time, it's actually methods of how to minimize the tension. So the first thing is recognize when you've got anxiety. When you feel the anxiety coming, pinpoint it, and don't just hope it'll go away, but learn to understand, okay, this anxiety is because I'm in a situation that I don't understand, or this anxiety is because I'm not getting the approval that I was looking for. I better find it from God. So once you recognize your emotion and learn how to deal with it, you can get back on the recovery curve. Deliberately learn the new culture. I think deliberately putting yourself in places with people from that culture. Once you get the culture shock, you're like, I just want to hide away in my bedroom and not go out and meet people. That's the wrong thing. Once you feel like I want to hide away, that's probably the time when you think I need to find a friend that I can go and do something with, a German friend that I can do something with that will actually make me realise, oh, I can survive in this culture, that they can understand me and I can understand them. And that gives you something to hook onto. If you haven't got those hooks, you can easily detach yourself from the culture. So yeah, find some good friends, some good hooks that you can just go and do something fun, whether it's bowling or cinema or music or walking or whatever, but something that you can enjoy together. And in the beginning, when you can't speak a lot of the language, something that doesn't take a lot of language, yeah, whether it's, you know, going to the gym together or whatever, but something that you could do with a German friend that will actually build up your sense of belonging to the community. Yeah, decide to be a learner. Yeah, so deliberately go and ask, how do you cook German food? What is a good place to shop? What do German people enjoy cooking? And get someone to teach you. And then once you actually think, oh yeah, I know where to buy this stuff, I know what to do with it when I've bought it, I can make some German food that if a German person comes and eats it, they actually say, yeah, this is good. Then you feel like wow, I'm actually functioning in this culture as an adult, right? Rather than, oh, I'll invite a German person and make them some of my food, and they're like, I'm not so sure about that. They might eat it, but it's not the same, right? So one of my accomplishments in Turkey was actually being able to cook Turkish food that a Turkish person would come and eat. It took a while. I think my first few attempts, they'd eat it, they'd be like, this is a foreigner cooking Turkish food. But when you get to the place where you can actually cook their food and they're like, oh, this is good, and they eat more, you feel like you're functioning properly in that culture. But you have to go out and learn. Yeah? And usually the learning comes from relationship, not from a cookery book. Yeah, you need to go and find even an old lady down the corridor who's bored, who will teach you to cook. Something like that. And it builds relationships. So go out and find things to learn, whether it's food, whether it's what do they do in certain situations for like a cultural game. What do German people, what did we said that when we were talking, we said that people in Hong Kong like mahjong, right? That's what they do when they want to go out and enjoy something together. What do German people do? Turkish people play backgammon a lot in the streets. There's what is a German game that people like to do? Go and learn it. Mind game. Yeah, but what is a game that, or what is a fun thing to do? Yeah, and do that, learn that. What kind of dance? If they dance, do they dance? What kind of dance? If you're going to be with Iranian people, learn to dance Iranian style. So that's the kind of thing. Learn what they do, and learn to do it. To a standard that they would say, yeah, you're acceptable. You're not just like an amusing thing to watch. Yeah. Take the initiative. Yeah, don't just sit around waiting for someone to invite you. You have to go and ask them. If you're the one who wants to fit in the new culture, you're the one who has to think, I'm a learner, I'm going to go and ask. So those are kind of things that actually help you start coming up this curve. Yeah, go and ask people, go and find people. Invite them, practice, and realise that your mistakes are inevitable. You will do things that make them laugh. You will make food that they're like, not sure about, or or forget to put the right ingredient in something and make it taste weird. But yeah, just accept mistakes as stepping stones on the journey to learning, right? You expect to make mistakes when you're doing your grammar, but you expect to improve as you go along. So expect that in all areas of life. You're going to learn, you're going to make mistakes, but once you've done the same mistake twice, you probably won't do it a third time. So yeah, Deliberately do that. Make a conscious effort. Yeah, try deliberately to build friendships. And it's difficult because quite often in our own cultures, friendships just happen naturally. Like you meet someone that you get on with, and you do something together, or you're already doing something and you meet somebody, and they just happen naturally. But the friendships in a new culture are something that you have to seek out. You have to try and find people, and people, you know, before you find someone who will become your friend, you might be rejected a few times by people who, possibly they're people who wanted to gain something from you and didn't gain what they wanted. You know, they might want to learn English from you but didn't learn enough, or you know, they I don't know, they, you know, some people want a token foreign friend to say, look, I'm popular, I've got a foreign friend, or whatever. So you might, you know, first of all find a few people that are not the right ones, but eventually you'll find people that you can make friends with. You know, there are nice people who want to help. Yeah, so build some friendships. And be careful of our reactions, especially if you're in a group. If there's the three of you going to visit someone, or the three of you, you know, going somewhere, we often unknowingly criticize or reject other people by our facial expressions. Like if something is different, we might be like, but they read our expressions, yeah? And so they feel rejection. So we have to be quite careful of the way that we're like, what did he say, or what's he doing, or what's that? You know, those kind of things that to us would be very natural can actually be offensive if you're invited to somebody's house and they see you doing that, and it builds more of a gap rather than a, yeah. So we need to learn how to show in a kind of way that is, gosh, I don't understand what's going on, will you help me? Rather than, you know, what's going on. When we're in the phase of thinking that our own culture is superior, or that our ways of doing things are better, even our reaction when someone tells us this is how we do it, what? You know, that kind of feeling of like nonsensicalness or whatever can also reject people. So being careful of the way that we question their facts. Really? Is that really what people do here? Really, you eat that? Or, you know, yeah, really, you can't, you know, you can't do this on a Sunday morning, or whatever the things that seem nonsensical to us, the way that we question their facts, or sometimes talk down to people because we think that what they're saying is less logical, you know, about their culture. Maybe not German culture, because I'm sure they're very, very, very logical. But, you know, in some places we might think that's just not logical, but for them it is. Yeah, for example, or yeah, forgetting their names because they're too hard. Yeah, that also is something, you know, paying real attention to try and remember names that are not usual to us, or there was one missionary who was working in a foreign country, but he would never, if they were travelling anywhere, he wouldn't give the tickets to one of the local people because he thought, oh, they might lose them. It's like, you know, that kind of thing. Not trusting other people as much as you trust your own culture is actually ethnocentric. Yeah, why do we think that? You know, why do we think we're more trustworthy? Yeah. Yeah. If we expect people to trust us and the message that we want to give them, we've got to trust them first and build a relationship of trust. So yeah, so that was like, yeah, relationships. And then also setting realistic goals when you're in this period. Don't expect yourself to suddenly be a fully functioning adult in another culture. If you expect that, then you'll always be disappointed, and you'll always live every day with that gap between expectation and reality. So set realistic goals, and it might just be, yeah, I'm going to learn how to cook and shop for a certain meal, or I'm going to learn how to go to the gym, which, you know, you've already done. That's something that's on your up. Or I'm going to learn how to, you know, get some exercise, I'm going to learn how to relax, I'm going to learn how to go to the library, or whatever it is, a new thing. And when you've done that one thing, you can feel a sense of accomplishment. You don't have a gap in what I should be doing everything straight away. So the difference between your expectation and your reality is the degree of stress. So make sure that you've got, yes, an upward curve, but make sure that you're setting your realistic targets for what you expect to do. And laugh a lot when you make mistakes. Laugh at yourself, really. Learning to laugh at yourself is a big factor in adaptation to a new culture. Don't expect, this is, I should be achieving this, like in terms of work or something like that. Actually learning the culture and building relationships is work. And if you're succeeding at that, then in the first couple of years, really, that should be the main thing. Building relationships and learning the language and culture. That is enough to say, wow, I am progressing. And also make sure that you take time for yourself. It's a balance between don't hide away from the culture, but also when you are getting overwhelmed, find what you need to do to restore that, take away that stress, whether it's going for a walk, reading a book, whatever it is, and know, okay, right, I've done that now I can go back. So don't stay in that kind of, I've got my little old barrier to hide myself from culture stress, but know when you need to just take a bit of time for yourself. So keep a good balance in that. And share your burdens, not as a complaint to other people. Oh, it's awful this, isn't it? It's awful that, I hate going to the rat house, blah 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 blah, whatever it is. But so not just as a complaint when you wind yourself down about how difficult and stressful things are, but be able to share and someone say, yeah, it is hard, I've experienced it too, but it will get easier, we will learn it, we can do this. So be like sharing and encouraging to build up rather than complaining to wind down. And expect it to take time. You don't get from here to here in 2 weeks or 2 months. Expect that you're on a journey of adaptation, and once you get to here, that is, if we go back to our talk about the seed, this is probably the bit where the seed is dying. Its shell is being split, and all the things that it used to think were its form and its shape and all of that are being questioned, and it's going into the ground and dying, but it's coming up as a new plant. So we can see that also in our cross-cultural adaptation. And I think for me, I've said it before, I don't know if you've heard, but when I was in Korea, and I cried so much, I had so many times of misunderstanding, of me trying to do what I thought was good and kind and right, but people thought I was a bad person. Not being able to understand how to cook, feeling completely stupid, getting lost in the street and not being able to find my way and not being able to ask anyone how to get back, those kind of things. It's really, really hard times, and I did want to go home and give up several times, more than several times. But keeping on going, and when I got to a point where I remember I was working with a church youth group, and we were having another group of foreigners coming over, and they were counting how many Koreans and how many foreigners, and the young people that were counted a different number to me. And I was like, no, who are you counting? And I realised that I'd counted myself with the foreigners, but they'd counted me with the Koreans. And I said, no, but I am a foreigner. And they're like, yeah, but you're not a real foreigner. You're like one of us. And that made me realise, I'm not fully Korean, but they don't feel that I'm a foreigner that they have to do something special or different for. They don't have to feed me different food because I'm foreign. They don't have to make me more comfortable because I'm foreign, because I fit into their culture. And that made me think, okay, that's good. And I felt happy and good about that, and I realised, I can connect enough to be able to give my influence in the right way through God into these people. There's not a barrier between us, we're connected. And that's what I think the point that God's expecting us to get to, so that we can actually truly convey the message he wants to us to give into those people. We don't have to be German, but we have to be enough so that they say, oh no, you're not like a foreigner. You know, you're like one of us. And Jesus was from heaven. He wasn't a human, but he was enough like one of us for us to be able to relate to him. Yeah. And that's our aim. And it is possible, and it is hard, but there is a way up if we take it and make sure that we don't stick in the bottom here, or hide ourselves away in a foreign ghetto or in our own little bubbles. Bubbles can be a good thing, but if they're if they're the place that we stay in and don't break out of, then they can stop us from adapting to the real culture.